Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling something that I think is super relevant to pretty much everyone's lives, and that is the idea of risk in Islam.
Yeah, wrist. I mean, we hear that word so much growing up, in a Muslim household or in a Muslim community, but
It's one
um
of those things you kind of think,
yeah,
but then when you really start to think about it, it's actually way deeper than maybe we initially realized.
exactly. Exactly. And I think that's what's so cool about this video that we're going to be unpacking today by Dr. Omar Suleiman. He really does a great job, I think, of taking this concept that we might feel like you're familiar with and pushing us to think about it in a whole new way.
And maybe even challenge some of our assumptions about what risk actually is and how it plays out in our lives.
Right, because it's not just about money, right? I mean, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind, I think, for a lot of people when they hear the word risk.
Totally. Like I think about, putting food on the table, paying the bills, like that kind of basic level of sustenance.
Yeah, the material stuff, but risk is actually this much broader concept that encompasses like every form of provision that we receive from Allah.
Like what else? Give us some examples.
Okay, so think about it, like good health, that's risk.
Oh, yeah.
Loving relationships, that's risk, knowledge, guidance, even opportunities for growth and to do good in the world. That's all risk.
I'm starting to see what you mean about it being a much bigger picture than just, what's in our bank accounts.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into this video by Dr. Omar Suleiman. One of the first things he really emphasizes is this idea that our risk is predetermined.
Right. And that's a concept that, some people might find kind of, I don't know, maybe a little bit difficult to grasp at first. Like, if everything's already decided, then why even bother, right?
Right, exactly. Like, what's the point of striving? What's the point of making an effort if it's all, already written down somewhere?
Sure. I mean, it's a natural question to ask, but what Dr. Suleiman does so beautifully in this video is he connects that concept of preordained risk to tawakkul, which is like this deep trust and reliance on Allah.
Okay, say more about that. I mean, how does knowing that your risk is already determined actually strengthen your trust in Allah?
Well, think about it like this. When we truly believe that Allah has already decreed our sustenance, it frees us from this constant anxiety about, am I going to have enough? Am I going to be able to provide? Am I going to get that promotion?
Hmm. That's interesting. So it's not about like
Mm.
sitting back and waiting for things to just fall into our laps.
No, not at all. We still have to put in the effort. We still have to work hard, but we're doing it with this underlying sense of peace and acceptance, knowing that the outcome is ultimately in Allah's hands.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. It's like this balance between, doing our part and surrendering to his will. Like we're not just passive passengers,
Mm.
but we're also not trying to control every little detail.
Exactly. It's that beautiful dance between effort and surrender.
And Dr. Suleiman, he uses this really powerful analogy to illustrate this point. He talks about birds going out in the morning with empty stomachs, right? But then they come back full.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's so simple, but it just perfectly captures this idea of how our efforts and Allah's provision work together. Like the birds, they're out there searching for food, they're putting in the work, but ultimately it's Allah who's guiding them, who's providing for them.
Right. And it's kind of a reminder that we might not always understand how Allah is providing for us. Like we might be stressing about something, but meanwhile, he's already got a plan in motion.
Yeah, exactly. It's about trusting that He's always taking care of us even when we can't see it, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. So Dr. Suleiman talks about how both wealth and poverty can actually be tests from Allah.
Yeah, and he's not shying away from the fact that, financial hardship can be incredibly difficult. It's a test.
Yeah, and it's not just like a theoretical test either. Like he really gets into the emotional impact of financial struggle. He talks about the uncertainty, the regret, even the shame that some people might feel when they're struggling to make ends meet.
Right, and especially the impact it can have on families. I mean, when you're worried about how you're going to provide for your loved ones, when you're feeling like you're letting them down, that's a really heavy burden to carry.
It's like the foundations of your life are just shaking. So it's easy to see how poverty can be a test,
Right.
right? Like it's this really intense trial of your patience, your resilience, your faith.
Right, but what's so insightful about Dr. Suleiman's perspective is that he doesn't present wealth as like the automatic solution or the opposite of that test.
Oh, that's so true. I think we often fall into this trap of thinking, like, if only I had more money, all my problems would be solved.
Right, but Dr. Suleiman actually flips that on its head. He's saying, hold on, wealth itself can be a test, just in different ways.
Give me an example. How so?
Well, you know how we often associate wealth with like comfort and ease, But it can also come with its own set of challenges, right? Do we use our wealth responsibly? Do we stay grounded and grateful? Or do we let it become a distraction from what truly matters?
Those are good questions. It's
Yeah.
like the classic, more money, more problems kind of situation.
Yeah, and I think what Dr. Suleiman's getting at is that it's not about the amount of risk we have. It's about our attitude towards it. It's about how we handle it, how we use it, how we let it shape our hearts.
And he backs this up with some really powerful examples from Islamic history, too. He talks about Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, who faced like immense trials, but it all started with the loss of his wealth.
Right. So even before he endured all those other hardships, the physical pain, the loss of his family, it was his wealth that was taken away first. And, in the Quran, it describes how Shaitan was like, Ayub's only worshiping you because you've given him all these blessings. Take them away and see what happens. Oh, wow. So it was like a direct challenge to his faith. Like, will he still be grateful? Will he still turn to Allah even when he's lost everything?
And then we also have the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who faced periods of intense difficulty, like the boycott in Makkah, where he and his followers were like literally cut off from their livelihoods.
Oh, yeah, that was a brutal time. They were facing starvation, persecution, everything.
Exactly. And even the prophet himself experienced poverty. Like there were times when he didn't even have enough food to eat.
And that's the prophet, the most beloved of Allah's creation. So it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Like, our worth in the eyes of Allah isn't tied to our bank accounts. It's how we handle these tests with faith, with resilience, with a heart turned towards him that really matters.
It makes you think about what are our real riches? What are the things that truly bring us lasting happiness and fulfillment? And I think that's a perfect segue to one of the most profound messages in Dr. Suleiman's talk, this idea of contentment being the true riches. Yes, I love that part. He quotes Sufyan al-Thawri, who said that true richness is only found in contentment. Like that just hits you right in the feels.
Right. It's so simple, but it's so deep. And it's something that we all struggle with. I know I do. It's like we're constantly chasing after more, but we're never really satisfied.
Yeah, it's like we get caught up in this comparison game. Like, oh, if only I had that car or that house or that job, then I'd be happy.
But true contentment, it's not about what we have. It's about how we feel about what we have. It's about finding that inner peace and satisfaction regardless of our circumstances.
And it's not something that just happens overnight, right?
No, it's definitely a journey. It's something we have to cultivate over time through gratitude, through mindfulness, through trusting in Allah's plan for us.
And there's this really incredible hadith that Dr. Suleiman shares that just drives this point home. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said that Allah places riftness in the soul of those he favors, so they are content even with little. Conversely, those he wills harm for, they always see poverty regardless of their possessions.
Wow. I mean, that's powerful, right? It's almost like contentment is a form of risk itself. Like when Allah blesses us with that inner richness, we can experience abundance even in the midst of material scarcity.
And on the flip side, even if you have all the wealth in the world, if you don't have that contentment, you're always going to feel like you're lacking something.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important reminder for all of us, especially in today's society, where we're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should have, what we should be striving for, what success looks like.
Yeah, it's like this constant pressure to accumulate more. But what Dr. Suleiman is reminding us is that true happiness, true fulfillment, it comes from within. It comes from finding that contentment with what Allah has provided.
And recognizing that He is the ultimate provider, the source of all blessings.
And now, this might sound a bit counterintuitive. Okay, so Dr. Suleiman also talks about how there are actually blessings in deprivation.
Yeah, I know that might seem kind of strange at first. Like, how can there be blessings in lacking something?
Right, it goes against our natural inclination to seek comfort and ease. I mean, nobody wants to be deprived, right?
Of course not. But when you look at it through the lens of spiritual growth, it starts to make a lot more sense.
Okay, explain that to me. How does deprivation lead to spiritual growth?
Well, think about it. When we're facing hardship, when we're feeling deprived, we're often driven to turn to Allah in a more profound way. We rely on Him more fully. We seek His help and guidance more desperately. And in that process, we can actually develop a deeper connection with Him.
That's interesting. So it's like sometimes those difficult times, they force us to really confront our dependence on Allah.
Exactly. They strip away all the distractions, all the things we rely on it in our own strength, and they leave us with nothing but our faith.
In Dr. Suleiman, he quotes another powerful hadith where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "If only you knew the rewards you had with Allah, you would want to be increased in poverty and need.
Yeah, and that's a really heavy hadith. Like, it's not saying that we should go out and seek poverty, right?
No, no, of course not. I mean, Islam emphasizes the importance of working hard and seeking lawful means of provision.
Right. But what the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, is highlighting here is the potential for spiritual growth that can exist within these challenges.
So it's about finding that balance between striving for improvement, like working towards a better life, while also recognizing that there can be this hidden blessing, this opportunity to get closer to Allah, even in the midst of difficulty.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective. It's about recognizing that sometimes the things we perceive as a lack of risk might actually be opportunities for us to draw closer to Allah and purify our intentions.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
It's like we shouldn't romanticize poverty or suggest that people should just accept hardship without striving for a better life,
Yeah.
right?
No, definitely not. But we also shouldn't assume that wealth is the answer to all our problems.
Right. It's about recognizing that both wealth and poverty can be tests, and it's about how we respond to those tests that really matters.
Exactly. It's about our attitude, it's about our intention, it's about our connection with Allah.
And I think that's what makes Dr. Suleiman's talk so powerful. He's not just giving us a lecture about risk. He's inviting us to look at our own lives, to examine our own hearts, and to ask ourselves, what is our relationship with sustenance? What is our relationship with Allah?
Yeah, I think he does a great job of connecting those two things. Like, understanding risk is ultimately about understanding our relationship with Allah.
And that's something that we can all benefit from, whether we're feeling abundant or whether we're feeling deprived.
Exactly. It's a reminder that he is the source of all blessings, and he's always with us, guiding us, providing for us, even when we can't see it.
It's so interesting how Dr. Suleiman talks about like different paths to paradise. And he uses the examples of Bilal, may Allah be pleased with them, and Abdullah Rahman ibn Auf, may Allah be pleased with him, to kind of illustrate this point.
Oh, those are great examples. Like, you have Bilal, who went through so much hardship and persecution for his faith.
Mm.
You know, his path was one of incredible patience and perseverance. And then you have Abdullah Rahman ibn Auf, who is known for his generosity and his wealth, and he used those resources to, support the early Muslim community.
Yeah. So two companions who were both deeply loved by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, but they took such different journeys.
Right. It's like Allah is showing us that there's no one right way to get to Jannah.
Yeah, there's no like one size fits all when it comes to spiritual growth.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And it's not about comparing our paths or feeling like one is better than another. It's about recognizing that Allah has a unique plan for each of us. And within that plan, there are so many opportunities for us to, draw closer to him.
Okay, so this is where I had a bit of an aha moment when I was watching Dr. Suleiman's video. He talks about how, like, if we're deprived in one area of our lives, Allah might be increasing our risk in another.
Yeah. And at first you might think, well, that's easy to say when you're not the one struggling, right?
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to see the silver lining when you're in the middle of a really tough situation.
Right. It's natural to focus on what we're lacking, especially when we're going through, a difficult time. But when we, kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture, we might start to see those like hidden forms of risk that are all around us.
Okay, so for someone listening who's, feeling really stuck or down about their situation, how can they start to shift that perspective? Like, how can they see their risk in a new light?
I think one of the most powerful things we can do is to really take some time for reflection. Ask yourself, what are the blessings in my life that I might be taking for granted?
Like, sometimes we're so focused on what we don't have that we forget about all the amazing things that we do have, right?
Right. It could be things like strong family bonds, supportive friends, good health, the ability to learn and grow, even just having a roof over our heads. Those are all forms of risk that, we often overlook.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that scarcity mindset, like always wanting more, more, more.
Right. But when we start to focus on what we do have and we start to appreciate those blessings, it can really shift our whole perspective.
It's like that saying, like, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Exactly. Sometimes it takes losing something to really appreciate its value. And, sometimes those periods of deprivation, those times when we're feeling like we're lacking, those can actually be incredible opportunities for us to cultivate gratitude.
Oh, that's so true. It's like when things are going well, it's easy to be grateful. But when we can find gratitude even in the midst of hardship, that's when our connection with Allah becomes even stronger.
Exactly, because it's like we're recognizing that even in those difficult times, even when we're feeling deprived, he's still with us. He's still providing for us in ways that we might not even realize.
Yeah, it's like a deeper level of trust,
Hmm.
like trusting that even when things are tough, he's got our back.
Yeah.
He's got a plan.
Mm.
Now, Dr. Suleiman also talks about this connection between sin and a decrease in risk.
Right, right. And that's something that, we often hear growing up, right? Like, if you do bad things, Allah's going to take away your blessings.
Yeah, and it can definitely make you think twice about your actions.
Right. But I think it's important to understand this concept in a nuanced way. It's not about Allah, like, punishing us by withholding risk whenever we mess up.
It's more about understanding how our actions can impact the quality of our risk,
Yeah.
like the baraka in our provision.
Yeah. The baraka. It's like that special, that kind of like invisible, almost magical ingredient that makes our risk feel abundant and fulfilling?
So we might have a lot of something, but if it's not accompanied by baraka, it might not actually bring us the happiness and the contentment that we're seeking.
Exactly. Baraka is like, it's that feeling of, like abundance and ease, even when we don't necessarily have a lot materially. It's that sense that our risk is like stretching further than it logically should, that our efforts are being multiplied,
Huh.
and that we're experiencing like genuine ease and contentment in our hearts.
Okay, so if someone's listening and thinking like, oh man, maybe I need to like make some changes, what's the takeaway here? Like, how can they invite that baraka back into their lives?
Well, the good news is that we have the power to change our course, right? Repentance is always an option. When we sincerely turn back to Allah, when we seek His forgiveness and we strive to like align our actions with His guidance, we invite that baraka back into our lives.
So it's not just about asking Allah for more, it's about making ourselves worthy of receiving more.
Yeah. Exactly. It's about purifying our intentions. It's about recognizing that true abundance, that true baraka. It comes from seeking His pleasure in all that we do.
That's such a good point. Okay, there's this one quote from Dr. Suleiman that just stuck with me. He says, when he gives you, he shows you his kindness. When he deprives you, he shows you his power. And in all that, he's making himself known to you. Like, that's just so deep.
Wow, that's powerful. Right. It's like in both the abundance and the scarcity, Allah is revealing Himself to us.
Yeah, and inviting us to recognize him, to draw closer to him. And that's where that tawakkul comes in, right?
Yeah.
That trust in his plan, even when we don't understand it.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to His wisdom, accepting His decree, and finding that peace in the knowledge that He's always with us. He's guiding us, He's supporting us, even when we can't see it. And, Dr. Suleiman he shares this beautiful story about two scholars. One is like pretty wealthy and the other is struggling financially.
Yeah, tell me about that. I love the stories.
So the poor scholar, he arrives late to this gathering and he apologizes. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. I ran out of oil from my lamp and I had to go and find some more.
Oh, I feel that. Been there.
And then the wealthy scholar, he responds and he's like, oh, I was delayed too, but it was because I got distracted admiring the beauty of my chandeliers.
Wow. What a contrast, right?
It's such a good reminder that we all have our own unique tests. The poor scholar's test was in patience and contentment. And the wealthy scholar's test was in detachment from, those worldly possessions.
Like even abundance can become a veil between us and Allah.
Exactly. It's like a distraction. And it's a good reminder that, true contentment, it's not about our circumstances. It's about our heart's disposition. It's about recognizing that Allah is always inviting us to draw closer to Him. And those invitations, they can come in so many different forms.
Yeah, through blessings, through trials, through ease, through hardship. Like it's all part of His plan for us, and it's all an opportunity to grow closer to Him.
Exactly. And I think that's such a beautiful and empowering way to think about our lives.
I feel like we could talk about this stuff for hours.
Oh, I know, right?
Even
It's just one of those
under the
topics that
climate.
just keeps unfolding the more you think about it.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface, really, but I think we've covered some really important ground here. We've talked about how risk is not just about money, it's about all the ways Allah provides for us. We've explored the idea of both wealth and poverty being tests, and how contentment is like this hidden treasure that can bring us true richness.
And what I really appreciate about Dr. Suleiman's approach is that he doesn't just like talk about these concepts in this abstract way. He really grounds them in our relationship with Allah.
Yeah, he constantly brings it back to that. Like, how are we connecting with Allah through our risk?
Exactly. He's saying Allah is making Himself known to us through every experience, through the abundance, through the scarcity.
It's like He's inviting us to see his hand in everything.
Yeah, in every aspect of our lives. And to use those experiences, those moments of abundance and scarcity, as opportunities to draw closer to him.
Remember that image of the birds going out hungry but returning full? That's not just about physical sustenance. It's about that tawakkul, that trust in Allah's plan.
Like that deep knowing that he's taking care of us.
Right. Even when we can't see it.
Even when it doesn't feel like it. And Dr. Suleiman makes this really interesting point in the video.
What's that?
He says that the one who eats and is grateful is like the one who fasts and is patient.
Oh, wow.
Like they're both engaging in acts of worship.
I never thought of it like that.
Right. It's just in different forms.
So whether we're experiencing abundance or we're experiencing scarcity, we have this opportunity to turn it into an act of worship.
By cultivating the right attitude.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering, what are some practical things we can do, to apply this understanding of risk to our lives?
Well, I think, one of the most powerful things we can do is to cultivate a sense of gratitude for what we already have. It's so easy to get caught up in, focusing on what we lack, comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
But when we take the time to appreciate those blessings in our lives,
Yeah, both the big and the small.
it can really shift our whole perspective. And, maybe even start to see those things that we perceive as, lacking as potential opportunities for growth.
Yeah, like instead of feeling, resentful or bitter about a financial setback.
Right. Like, what if we saw it as a chance to practice patience, a chance to deepen our reliance on Allah?
To really lean into that tawakkul.
Exactly.
That's so good. And something else that really stood out to me was that idea of different paths to paradise.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we don't all have to follow the same route.
It's not about comparing our journeys or feeling like one is better than another.
It's about recognizing that Allah has a unique plan for each of us.
And within that plan are countless opportunities for us to draw closer to him.
So maybe, instead of feeling envious of someone else's blessings, we can focus on making the most of what we've been given.
And using it in a way that pleases Allah.
That's good. And remember, repentance is always an option.
Always.
If we feel like we've been deprived of rizq because of, our own shortcomings, we can always turn back to Allah.
Ask for his forgiveness.
And try to do better.
Strive to align our actions with his guidance.
I think this deep dive has been such a powerful reminder that understanding rizq is really about understanding our relationship with Allah.
At its core.
Yeah. It's about recognizing his hand in every aspect of our lives.
And striving to live in a way that reflects gratitude and trust.
And surrender to his will.
So as you go about your day today, take a moment to just reflect.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, where do you see Allah's rizq in its various forms?
What opportunities for gratitude and trust are present, even in the midst of challenges?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into rizq.
May Allah grant us all understanding and contentment.
In all that he provides.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep reflecting, and keep diving deep.